Hi everyone, good morning. Yes, so welcome to another year, another day with leading this generation. And today I really want to focus, I really want you to not focus on my lighting today, but I really want you to understand our season's dimness and where our season, our generation's dimness is at in our season. And what's saying that the arguments concerning our generation this season, and I don't, well, this is leading this generation, yes, with Rabia Elise. I am in Auckland, New Zealand, yes. And for those who really want to understand why they have to find themselves not inside of these arguments today, but outside of the arguments, right? It is that our generation today have to decide to listen to what they want to argue on concerning their protection, right? And we believe that all our protection is important. And we also believe that with having to learn that our circumstances requires us to respond to that is protective to us. We all abide to that, but we do not want to have our generation argue concerning protecting yourself, and then you could have allowed yourself to step back to decide to not argue today anymore about that has happened in you yesterday. It is that our generation learned that nothing that any one of us did was ever wrong. Nothing that anyone ever decided to do concerning their lives and concerning the situation that they were surrounded with was anyway wrong. But we can also not allow ourselves to say that what is happening in Russia today, what is happening in Ukraine today, what has been happening in Africa, in Syria, the Turkish earthquakes, we cannot allow ourselves to tell us that that is fine. We cannot allow ourselves to tell us that where China finds themselves at having to go and argue concerning their leadership in our generation, and having to go and argue with leaders that want to tell Sina that Sina is still in argument with them, and that Sina did this wrong and this wrong and this wrong. Sina decides to speak today like Rabia Elise would speak in a season. They decide to voice today that they do not care whether they were involved in the situation. What they require leaders to do is to not continue to argue with them concerning the yesterdays that everyone was involved with, right? It is that sometimes we have to be firm concerning it, and we do not want Sina to go out and to go and be angry with anyone. But people's oppression sometimes it hinders where you are at in your season, and it has our generation find themselves, everyone want to argue where they want to be at, and everyone have to learn to sometimes say that, you know what, this leadership is required in our generation, let this person lead in our generation. It is that we're not gonna allow ourselves to still argue about the situation or to still argue with them, but it is that leadership that needs to be firm, that says that I'm going to make a standpoint in my season, and I'm not going to negotiate with the way that y'all are going on. That some people find themselves today having lived their years on earth, and they are now ready to just want to bomb up, and some countries are ready to argue with Sina, and Sina has decided to protect their house and to protect their children, and they are firm about it. And therefore, any comments that anyone has concerning their house, concerning their children, concerning any miscommunication in the season, I'm gonna ask everyone to learn to know when to take a step back, because everyone is excited, and Sina's always been the strongest country, and Sina's always just want this and this and that. But I am not gonna say that they are not now wanting to not voice what is their protection. But what I am telling everyone is that the house of Sina is non-negotiable concerning the leaders that find themselves in parliamentary seats, and that now decided to now point fingers to the house of Sina in order to get into those children's house, in order to want to oppress those children tomorrow. And those parents are non-negotiable about their children's protection. Another thing that I want to say today for our generation, it is that the house of Sina, the house of Japan, the house of North Korea, the house of South Korea, the house of Vietnam, the house of the Philippines, we have been educated as a generation, and our generation calls those houses the cousins, and the cousins are not drunk in it. And we all know that South Africa, our parents educated us when we were young. The cousins, we call Sina the 4 cousins, or the how many cousins that there are, and they are not drunk in it. And everyone wanted to see them in war, and wanted to argue with them, and wanted to overrule their houses. And then when AWOKH said take a step back, you know what, they did not go and react based on what you required them to react at. They were firm on making sure that on the news that even our opinions as normal human beings that is not in the parliamentary house today, that even our opinions are sometimes required in situations like that, because everyone was all excited to now stir an argument in those houses, and and China was really ready to go and fight Japan, and North Korea was really ready to fight South Korea, and every one of the other countries were all excited and were having a gloomy time about it. And you know what? It is time in our generation that we say that, you know what? We are going to be firm about no one is going to force no one in our generation to be the weaker country and to now go and mess their country up and to now go and bomb it up, and everyone else is having a gloomy time where they are at. It is, yes, everyone was a part of y'all's conversations and y'all all had a good time and y'all had y'all's arguments, but the way that the generation has now decided to sabotage those houses, some of us in our generation doesn't agree with it. In some of our generation's houses, it is clear and we are firm that we are not gonna allow anyone to abuse any houses. We are not gonna say that we stand with this family or this family or that family. We do not care what y'all's arguments are, but y'all wanted them to start in battle so that y'all can bomb their houses down. And we said that we are not gonna allow that, and we are firm about it. We are firm about not taking from children what someone else maybe you thought took from you or maybe didn't take from you. Many of y'all started these books and knew that these books started years ago. You were born into this generation. You had yourselves in a season that sometimes, yes, you have to protect yourself. But I'm gonna be firm about saying that the way that everyone thought they played it is wrong. Another thing that I'm going to mention again today is Rishi Sunak, the Indian guy. I'm going to have to mention him, and I'm very firm about that. And I want to today mention that Rishi Sunak and those European seat was a Nibbly Bits discussion where I was working at Nibbly Bits, South Africa, Wellington. And he found himself today in a season that I am in. And I remember that character of Rishi Sunak was a young boy that went with me to New Orleans Secondary School. And he's standing today in a place where, in a discussion where he is not meant to be at in his season. I do not care whether he stands with a bomb threat in his hand today. I do not care what his argument is at today. If there was a discussion at Nibbly Bits, there was European managers in those offices, and they made an agreement with deciding to not argue about any apartheid discussions. We do not know why we all were at Nibbly Bits. We did not discuss this in person. No, it was a universe discussion that happened, and no one of us knew until this season and that day that was the discussion that happened in the European House. I want to say that Emmanuel Macron from France has moved on another step to Africa to go and take another message, and we are watching those steps in season, because we are not gonna carry Rishi Sunak or whoever is threatening Europe or wherever your threats come from. None of us is gonna negotiate no one to abuse our houses or our situations. We have families in these countries, and our families are firm to say that these disagreements you're gonna have to get out of. If Rishi Sunak in India is fighting with anyone today in this world, then they're gonna have to be firm on television, and they're gonna have to explain it, and they're gonna have to explain today in the European House, while there's a European war that is Russia-Ukraine, why is the intermediate that stands today on the European seat, why is that person an Indian today? Why is it Rishi Sunak today that intermediates and intercedes? What did I tell all of y'all? That he is not even European. He does not even understand the discussion, and the communication line on earth in leaderships is communication lines to another part of the universe, and the communication reports comes back to us, and the more he stand on that seat is the more that Ukraine and Russia will find themselves in that situation. Why? Because the communication barrier is Rishi Sunak that stands today on a seat that he is not meant to voice for. He's not meant to explain the Russia-Ukraine situation with where he's standing in Parliament in the United Kingdom. I am not going to accept that. I am not going to accept any arguments that continue on in our season. We are all listening into a lot of arguments, a lot of discussions that y'all have. There's a lot of radio keys that plays in my house that I listen to y'all's opinions concerning the generation and concerning the challenges that happens in our countries today. But I want to say to the European nation, do not argue concerning apartheid battles that has happened years ago. And I want to say to the African American generation, I know y'all had your European discussions concerning the challenges in your countries, but I also do not want Africa to once again be abused in a war state that other countries sometimes want to see another country at, right? There's countries that constantly sit in war, that constantly sit in pain, and our generation has decided to not be part of those countries. And when we are not part of those countries anymore, we have decided to not argue about arguments that is not us, no. And we have decided to voice for the protection even of other countries to say that we are not in apartheid. So anyone who makes us part of apartheid issues, today we want to be firm about that, to say that Africa is not going to be bombed down because of a decision that India stands today and says that he's standing in a house that has a discussion concerning an African apartheid issue, concerning reparation, because Emmanuel Macron clearly says in his discussion that he's walking to Africa and to give the reparation discussion. He said that even after the Syria-Turkish earthquake happens, and even after they have decided to argue, even another argue on the European borders. So I am not going to negotiate anymore with any one of these arguments that any one of y'all has. You'll have to decide to take a step back. You'll have to decide to get over these arguments, and you'll have to decide to not do to the other what you do not want to have done in your own house. I do not care who's walking today with the strongest weapon on this earth, but I'm listening today to Shina, who's requiring and who's responding to that our generation really not want to have our countries bombed down, because certain people find themselves in their olden age and in their olden years, and now they want to run around, want to play around games with us in parliamentary houses. We have made a firm point that we want to not have anyone abuse the house before they leave office, and then they want to leave us in a situation that now Rishi Sunak stands in the season that Rabia Elise was spoken about at Nibbly Butts, at New and Bolam Bold. It was also European, Justin Oates, yes, and the European team, Stefan Drees, Sal was also, he's also African, yeah, white African, and Sal Bernstrauss, Germany, all of y'all, we are in that season, but we are not going to allow anyone to bomb our countries down like that, because that was not what happened in those offices, and that was not, even if we didn't know what happened, because we didn't say with words what happened, and the discussion was not person in person, but the discussion was a spiritual discussion, and it was a discussion in the universe, that we cannot say that that was where the meeting was at, because that was not where any one of us was informed with. So Rishi Sunak, that stand on that seat, he's really manipulating it in the season, and I really do not understand why the financial advisor have to hand over the reparation money from Europe to the Africa team. I understand the apartheid concerning it, but Rishi Sunak handing over to Emmanuel Macron, and Emmanuel Macron goes and take the reparation money to Africa, or however y'all did it, we cannot agree with those arguments anymore. There's certain countries that really want to get out of these apartheid and poverty mindsets, and that really wants to find themselves fine again. We're not going to sabotage one another. We're not going to abuse one another. And I believe that all of those arguments that come from the parliamentary house will find themselves outside of the parliamentary house. And once again, y'all will be able to communicate concerning all of these arguments and discussions. And what else that I wanted to say is that while we are at it, we are not going to allow anyone to share any more bomb threats around, right? We are not going to allow anyone to say that Rishi Sunak stands in Rabia Elise's season, so now you want to manipulate Rabia Elise's Nibbly Butts discussion, and then that punishment go to South Africa years from today, because these communications go to different parts of the universe, and different parts of the universe understand the situation different. And Rabia's sister is today sitting in United Kingdom. Malvina Lachikan is today married to the Indian guy, and the whole situation that happened in South Africa and really is really involving all of our households. And I'm required to say that no one is going to manipulate the other. I'm required to say that there's discussions that happened in America that includes a lot of things. And I want to say that my Mama Anna never had a discussion with anyone concerning corruption. So no one is going to come and abuse the situation by trying to manipulate our generation into an abuse that is not meant to be like that. And I know people are sometimes trying to explain the situation in order to abuse someone else, but the Ukrainians are not going to lay in that abuse. The Russians are not going to be punished by it anymore, because everyone would have to learn to figure where they find themselves in the corruption season, and not try to blame it on the other, and not try to argue with one another, and rather try to decide where are they moving at, and where are they going to find themselves at in this season, because our houses are going to have none of it anymore. That is all that I wanted to say for today. That is all that I want to say concerning our situation, and I would not have wanted to say it anyway else. Another office that I've been at that has been very involved with it was Stamford Plaza in Auckland, New Zealand, where I'm at today. And Stamford Plaza Hotel, yes, there was the Jackson family that came in, yes, and they had the Indian family, and they were really in a discussion, and I really didn't understand. And the owners is Singapore owners, yes, Helen May, or the surname, yes, and they really were involved in these discussions, and we do not want any manipulation in our houses anymore. No world rulers, no new world order, nothing is gonna abuse and manipulate our households anymore. Antoinette has got children, has got Indian friends, yes, and I heard that Antoinette's youngest child, yes, they are at university. The oldest child is at university, and the second oldest is going to university now the next year, the beginning of January, and we do not want any manipulation around our households anymore. We are going to be firm about it, and yes, we know that people are listening in, but what we stand firm on in our season is that everyone would have to make that standpoint to tell themselves that they're not going to argue about the situation, but we are also not going to allow any abuses to go further on and any abusive messages to go further on in our generation. And therefore, I know our electricity is off because of this very reason, and I know that Putin and Sheena is busy with the South African government concerning all of these discussions, but I want everyone to really be firm to know that I know that many South Africans were involved in all of these discussions concerning Mama Anna's house and concerning Antoinette and concerning all of us, and y'all had lots of recordings throughout these days in South Africa that y'all have made, y'all TikTok videos. Sheena has said that they are not going to delete any of that information, and I agree with them for a very good reason. So all of those informations that y'all have made, you're going to find the arguments in your own houses, and you're going to sort it out, and you're not going to interfere with our generation that has decided to not be in poverty and abuse anymore. We are firm about it, we are non-negotiable about it, and we are not going to allow anyone to manipulate us any further. And that is all that I wanted to say for today. Have a stunning day further. Thank you.